Condo investments in Toronto have done extremely well, especially over the last decade, with condo prices up almost 80% over that period of time. And now more than ever, it's the perfect time and a great opportunity for anyone that is looking to invest in a condo in the city. Interest rates are the highest that they've ever been in the last 20 years. And at the same time, condo inventory is at all-time highs at about 6 months of inventory, meaning every condo to sell, there are 6 others listed for sale, which for the city of Toronto, this number is unusually high as it generally hovers around 1 to 2. This has put a lot of downward pressure on condos, with the average prices falling about 20% in 2023. Now, there is light at the end of the tunnel because many economists and experts are predicting interest rates may start dropping as early as the middle of 2024. And when you tack on the fact that Canada plans to let in 500,000 new immigrants every year for the next 3 years who tend to migrate to the core, on top of the fact that we've already had an ongoing supply issue here in the city, then the outlook for Toronto condos seems very promising. What's up everyone? My name is Fady Nakhla. I'm a real estate broker here in Toronto. If you get any value at all from this type of content and you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're thinking about investing in real estate here in the city or in the GTA and want to book an appointment with me one-on-one to have a chat about how we can help you with the whole process from start to finish, I have all my contact information in the description below, and I'd be more than happy to help. Whether this is your first ever real estate investment or you're adding your second, third, fourth property to your investment portfolio, in this video, I'm gonna go through a step-by-step guide on everything you need to know about investing in a condo in Toronto. Stay with me until the end and we'll actually go through and analyze a unit currently on the market using these steps, which I think might be a worthwhile investment. So let's get right into it. Step number 1, get a mortgage pre-approval. This one is pretty straightforward. Almost any thought out home buying guide will tell you to get a mortgage pre-approval before you go out shopping for a home. You're getting approved the same way you would for your primary residence. However, the reason I like to mention this one right off the bat is, unlike your primary residence, where you can sometimes get away with less than 20% down for your down payment, for an investment property, most lenders will require a minimum 20%, sometimes even 25 to 30% depending on your financial situation. Another thing to keep in mind here that differs from the usual mortgage approval process is some lenders will actually use the projected rental income or a portion of it when qualifying you for the mortgage for an investment property. So if you've already been thinking about investing and haven't yet taken this step just because you don't have a go-to mortgage broker or lender, you can reach out to me using the contact info in the description below, and I can send you a list of good mortgage lenders that me and my clients have used personally in the past. Okay, so you have a mortgage pre-approval, which takes us to step number 2, which is defining your goals. What do I mean by that? Well, there are different ways to invest in real estate, and they all have different outcomes or end goals. So you have to figure out what it is you're looking for, and it can really be all of these or only some of them, but it will matter because it'll help you decide what type of investment for you to make. So the 3 types of goals are, number 1, cash flow. So for example, on your condo rental property, how much money is left over after your tenant pays rent and you pay all the expenses associated with owning the property. Is that number positive? Is it negative? Is it break even? In Toronto, it's not very common to see a cash flow positive rental property, especially with long-term rentals and especially when you first purchase the property. It's possible, but it's not easy. And again, if that is going to be your main goal, then there are many factors that can play a role in achieving this. For example, you may need to make a bigger down payment. That way your mortgage payments are lower. You may need to secure a better rate with your lender. You may need to find properties with lower maintenance fees or annual property taxes. That way your cash flow can be positive. So it's that kind of thing. The second type of goal is appreciation. That's when you buy a condo, rent it out to a tenant, and hold that property long term with a plan to sell it at a later point in time. So to achieve this goal, you're picking properties to invest in that you know or feel will appreciate at a faster rate than some others. So for example, you're picking properties with a great location, ones next to transit or subway lines, ones built by reputable builders that you know have historically done well. And then goal number 3 is building equity. After you purchase your condo and rent it out, as you or your tenant pay down your mortgage, you are simultaneously building equity in the property because a portion of your monthly mortgage payments are actually going back into your property as principal. If you hold that property for the term of your mortgage, let's say 25 years, then at the end of the 25 years, when the mortgage has been fully paid off, you'll own the condo free and clear. Now, again, like I was saying before, some of these goals go hand in hand, right? If you purchase an investment condo and hold it long term, you'll likely be getting both the appreciation and the equity buildup, and maybe even the cash flow if you do hold it long enough. At the same time, sometimes you'll only get one of them or even a negative in one category. For example, you may hold a condo for 5 years before you sell it, and you have negative cash flow the whole way there, but at the same time, you're gaining appreciation and equity buildup to make it worthwhile. So depending on what your goals are, even if it's a combination of them, you'll be able to decide what type of investment to make. Which takes us to step number 3, deciding on the type of investment. There are many different ways to invest in a condo in Toronto, and each method will have its own pros and cons. So the first way to invest is to buy a pre-construction. This is when you purchase a condo directly from the builder and it hasn't yet been built. In this scenario, you'll generally be buying based on the builder or builder reputation, the location, and you'll be choosing your specific unit on paper based on the proposed building layout and floor plans. In Toronto, it generally takes about 6 to 7 years from when you sign the paperwork for your purchase to ultimately receiving your keys. There will usually be some sort of deposit structure, but generally the builder will require around 15 to 20% of the purchase price over the span of a year as a deposit, and that's it. Because the unit isn't built yet, you're not required to take out a loan or mortgage. There's a few pros and cons to a purchase like this, so let's get the bad stuff out of the way first. Firstly, since there's no mortgage, you're not paying anything into the property over the 6 years while it's being built. So you're not really getting any equity buildup there. And although there might be some appreciation over that time period, you can't 100% count on that because these units are usually priced quite a bit over the market value of similar units today. Number 2, you cannot forecast the market conditions when the condo is set to close. So when the condo is set to close in 6 years, if at that time interest rates are say 10%, then that's what you're stuck with. This can obviously go both ways. The rates may be lower than they are today, but it's just that uncertainty which makes this type of investment a little bit more difficult. And then number 3, there's a lot of additional fees and costs that sometimes you don't see upfront. So maybe you think you're getting a unit at a certain price, but once you add a few features to the unit that maybe you thought were standard, or maybe adding parking, along with other developmental fees and charges, you end up much higher than you expected for the final price of the unit. So those are the cons. How about the pros? Thousands of people buy pre-construction condos every single year, so there must be a reason, right? So pro number 1, most builders only require 10 to 20% as a deposit, usually divided up into separate payments over a year or even several years. So this makes it financially easier to buy into something like this. Pro number 2, there's no competition. Now what I mean by that is there's no bidding or offer process like you will sometimes see in the typical Toronto market. There's definitely demand for these units, but once the builder has set a price, as long as you're willing to pay that price, the unit is yours. Then pro number 3, you do end up with a brand new unit 6 or 7 years down the line, and when it comes time to sell or even rent in the future, people will usually pay a premium for something brand new and unlived in. And then pro number 4, most builders nowadays will include a clause in the agreement mentioning you can sell your unit on assignment. What this means is you're allowed to sell your contract essentially before the building is even built. So let's say in 5 years, plans change and you no longer want to close on this unit. You do have the option of selling this unit to someone else without ever having to take out a mortgage. And sometimes this sale will even come with a profit, although I do not generally recommend relying on this. So this gives you a little bit more flexibility. This type of investment would be ideal for someone who may not have all the money up front right now for a down payment, or is unable to secure a mortgage at this time, or even someone who may want to purchase multiple units at the same time, and this type of deposit structure allows them to do so financially. Now, with all that being said, I mentioned at the start of the video that it is a good time to buy into downtown Toronto right now, and because of the slow market that we're in, this also applies to pre-construction. Builders right now are giving out tons of incentives to those who do want to invest in pre-construction, things like super favorable deposit structures, cashback on closing, unit price discounts, cap development charges, things of that nature. And again, because of the type of market that we're in, they have been a little bit more conservative with the pricing to get these units sold, because at the end of the day, the developers cannot start building until at least 80% of the building is sold out. So it is in their best interest to get these units sold even in a slow market. One thing I do want to mention with this, for anyone interested in this type of investment, is it's really important to know that the builders will usually sell their units out in phases. So say there's 600 units total in the building, they'll sell 50 at a time, usually increasing the prices slowly after every release until they notice that the demand starts to level off. So how do you make sure to get in on the first or second release? That's where realtors such as myself come in. Usually the first few releases of these units are reserved for specific realtors or brokerages that have good relationships with the developer. You may have heard the term platinum or VIP agents. That's what that means. So if you're interested in this type of investment and want to get information on projects as soon as they're released, you can reach out to me using the info in the description below and we can have a quick chat. The one last thing I want to say about this is, if you as a buyer find the information on a pre-construction project online yourself, or you see it on a billboard and call the number and they send you the information directly, then you're most likely in one of the latter phases of this project and probably paying significantly more than what you should have been paying had you gone in early. I actually just sold a house for a client who had originally bought pre-construction on their own 4 years ago before we had met. We still made a profit on their sale, but I was familiar with the project. It was for detached homes out in Whitby in Durham, and these homes were originally selling in the low 800,000s when the project was first released. And my client told me they were one of the last ones to buy in, and they weren't familiar with the pre-construction sales process. So you will not believe how much they paid for their home. $1 million. That's right, there was a $200,000 spread between the first and last release of this project. So if there's one thing you're going to take away from here for this type of investment, is make sure you get in early. And if you don't, unless you need to be in this specific building, just wait for the next one. The second type of investment is to buy and flip. This is when you purchase a condo with a plan to renovate and sell it immediately afterward at a higher price. Now, this can be done in a condo, especially in some of the older ones, but I think it's more tailored and has better returns for townhomes and detached homes, just because there's a lot more you can do with them, especially when you factor in closing costs and the fact that many condos actually have restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'd say most of the time, this isn't a worthwhile investment strategy for a condo in the city, unless you get a really, really good deal on the condo to begin with. And the last type of investment, and probably the most common and recognized one, is buying to rent. This is when you purchase a condo and become a landlord with a plan to rent it out, and then you use that rent money to cover your mortgage payments. So there's multiple sources of income here. Firstly, you'll have someone essentially covering your mortgage for you through rent, building up your equity. And then second, you'll be holding a property that will continue to appreciate over time. The one thing I do want to mention with this type of investment is many times you will start with a negative cash flow. I think this deters a lot of people who think because the cash flow is negative, it's automatically not a good investment. And that's definitely not the case, as you'll see in one of our examples coming up. The important thing here is to factor in the appreciation and equity buildup, because once you do include those other factors, they will usually offset the cash flow you lose in the short term. Now, I'm not saying go in blind and just take the loss on the cash flow. You definitely have to be able to support it and make sure you consider the possibility of not finding a tenant right away as well. This type of investment tends to do very well long term, especially if you hold like 6, 7, 8 years or even more. That cash flow will eventually become positive as you continue to pay off your mortgage and as rent continues to increase at the same time. I've personally used this strategy to purchase an investment condo back in 2016. I ended up selling that unit in 2021, 5 years later, and I have a video about that whole process, sharing all the numbers right here. Okay, now that you've chosen what you want to do in terms of the type of investment and your goals, it's time to choose a condo, which takes us to step number 4, understanding the factors that make a good real estate investment. Again, this is where a good realtor is very valuable. There are 3 levels to this when deciding what makes a property a good investment. You first have the neighborhood, then you have the building, then you have the specific unit. you want to choose buildings that are in prime locations. Not all intersections or neighborhoods downtown Toronto are equal in terms of price and value. You want to take into consideration things like the transit in the area, the crime rate, the walk score, and even plans of future development. Then when you've zoned in on a specific location, you start looking at the buildings themselves. What are the amenities like? How many people are renting? How many people own? How many times has the maintenance fee gone up in the last 5 to 10 years? Who's the builder? Are they reputable? And then again, we take it one step further and you're looking at the units themselves. You want to pick units that not only appreciate the fastest, but will also rent out the easiest as well. So maybe units with a view, units with parking, depending on where you are. Maybe you don't need parking if you're right in the core. Also for the units, you're looking at layouts, which is very important and sometimes overlooked. You can't just look at the number of bedrooms or bathrooms or even size to determine value. It can give you an idea, yes, but you can have two units that on paper are identical in terms of size, but that end up selling and renting for much different prices. And that takes us to step number 5, research the rental rates. Once you've chosen a certain area or building, you want to look up and research the rental rates for those locations. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the last step because you may end up finding an area that you like, but that area may not end up renting as well. So it could be a deciding factor for you when you're trying to decide where you want to invest. This is again something a realtor can help you with. I wouldn't look at just the rental price history here, but also look at how long it takes for a unit to rent. Does it take a month, 2 months, 3 months? Because these types of things will matter. I'd also take a look at how many units are being rented and how often, so you can kind of gauge what the supply and demand looks like for this particular area or building. This step obviously doesn't apply as much to pre-construction or flipping homes, but it's definitely something you want to look at so that you can figure out an estimation of what your cash flow could look like in the future. That takes us to step number 6, understand the taxes. So step number 6 is you need to educate yourself on taxes and tax implications of owning an investment property. In Ontario, or actually all of Canada, rent is actually classified as income and is subject to income tax, which means you'll get taxed at your tax bracket, but you'll also be able to expense anything related to the renting out of the property, which includes the interest on your mortgage. Also, whether you do have a tenant or not, when you do sell your property in say 5 or 10 years, your sale will be subject to what is called a capital gains tax, which is essentially a tax on the increase in value of your property. They calculate this by taking the amount your unit has appreciated divided by 2 and then tax that amount by your current tax bracket. So for example, if you bought a unit for $700,000 and then sold it 5 years later for $1 million, your capital gains tax would be $300,000 divided by 2, which is $150,000 at your current tax bracket, which is, let's say 30%. So you'd owe $45,000 after your sale. So this would apply whether you invest long-term, then sell, or even flip short-term, or even if you buy pre-construction and then sell 7 years later when it is built. And this takes us to the last step, which kind of ties everything together, and that is step number 7, calculating the projected return on investment. So let's say now you found a unit for sale that you may want to buy and you have gone through all these steps. Before you even make an offer, you should already know approximately what your expenses will look like in terms of mortgage payments, maintenance fees, what your annual property taxes will look like. You also have an idea of what kind of income you can potentially bring in through rent. So using these numbers, again, before you even make an offer, you can decide for yourself if this is an investment that is worthwhile. The one thing I do want to mention for this step is when you start factoring in things like appreciation based on historical averages, just make sure you go very conservative on the calculations, especially if your margins are already really small. So for example, if you find a unit you like and that area has appreciated on average, say 8% per year for the last 25 years, when I'm running the numbers, I would probably assume even half of that, so 4% appreciation when I'm doing my calculations. That way, there's only good surprises in the future. I've created an investment or ROI calculator where you can plug in all your numbers and then find out really quickly what the return will look like for that particular investment. If you do want a copy of that, just leave a comment below or reach out to me using the contact info in the description below and I'll send that right over. Okay, and that's it guys. In this next part, what I'll do is go through a real life example where I follow these steps from choosing the unit to breaking down the numbers. That way we can decide together what is or is not a good investment. And this is what I'll usually do with all of my clients on a unit by unit basis when we're looking to purchase an investment property. So again, if you're still with me so far, and this is something that does interest you, we do help with the process from start to finish, from finding the unit to finding the tenant, and then keeping you updated with your condo value on a year-to-year basis. If you want more information, you can reach out to me using any of the contact info below and we can have a chat. So let's get right back into it. So step number one is getting a mortgage pre-approval. So let's say for this example, we submit all our documents to the mortgage broker and we're approved for a maximum $750,000 at the current fixed interest rate, which is, last I checked, 5.14%. And I have $165,000 in my bank account for 20% down payment and for closing costs. Step number two is defining our goals. So for this search, I'm looking for both appreciation and equity buildup. I know positive cash flow might be hard to come by at the current rates, but I'm not able to put any more money down to reduce my mortgage payments. So we're just going to have to accept the fact that it'll probably be negative cash flow, at least at the start, but we'll try to minimize that as much as possible. Step number three would be now choosing the type of investment. And based on my goals, I'll be looking for something to buy and rent out. Step number four is choosing the area, neighborhood, or building that I think will be good investment. So at this step, I can actually start looking through the properties currently on the market, and then I can analyze the areas as I find them. So at $750,000 as my cutoff for max price, I know I'm most likely going to be looking at 1+10 units. But with the slow market that we're in, I do want to first do a quick search for 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom units to see if there's anything that may be available, because something like that would most likely rent for more. And then that way I can try to minimize that negative cash flow as much as possible. So we get 19 results for units with this criteria, but I also want to filter out the units that currently have tenants, just because number one, if you're in a building that's rent controlled, they're probably already paying a lower than market rent unless they were signed this year. And then number two, I would just feel more comfortable doing my own due diligence in choosing the tenant myself. It is no secret that the landlord and tenant board here in Ontario is not the greatest when it comes to handling disputes in a timely manner. So I just want to make sure I'm involved in the tenant selection process. That way I can do everything I can to avoid having any future problems. So we're going to choose either owner occupied or vacant. And that gives us 13 results. So let's go through them quickly and see if there's anything worthwhile. And if not, then we'll widen our search to 1+ dense. So the first one here is 783 Bathurst Street, a little more north than I'd like. I prefer to find something closer to the core if possible. So let's skip this one for now. Next, we have 319 Jarvis Street. This building actually isn't built yet. This is an assignment sale. So someone is selling their contract. So we'll skip this one because we're looking for something currently built that we can rent out. Then we have 55 Center Avenue. I like the location of this building at Dundas and University, but the building itself is just under 35 years old. And with these older buildings, you tend to have higher maintenance fees. So the maintenance fee for this unit is about $1,200 per month. So that's definitely too high for me. So we'll skip this one. Next, we have 12 York Street. Again, I do like the location of this unit right next to Harborfront, but this building, 12 and 14 York, known as ICE Condos, you've probably heard about them on the news or on social media. They do allow short-term rental, which isn't a problem, but along with the fact that the building has poor management with constant elevator and flooding issues, it just has a bad reputation. So I tend to stay away from this one if possible. Next, there's a few around Bathurst and Lakeshore. We have 151 Danlecki Way and 600 Fleet. This area is referred to as City Place. There are a bunch of condos here that were built by Concord, who is not a bad builder, but definitely not one of the top ones. The values of the condos here are still increasing year after year, but just not as fast as some of the other areas. So for now, let's keep looking. Next, we have 19 Western Battery Road, which is located in Liberty Village, just about 5 to 10 minutes from the core. I'm a fan of Liberty Village. I like the area. I've personally owned a condo here myself in the past that did very well. So this building is called Zen. It was built by Centercorp, who is a reputable builder. The building itself is only 3 years old, which is great because it means the units are not rent controlled. Any building built or occupied after 2018 is not rent controlled. So this one does fall under that category, meaning you can increase your rent as you please year after year for your tenant. You don't have to follow the city guideline. So I think we may have found something worthwhile here with this unit. There's 2 units listed for sale, but one of them has actually already sold conditionally. So we're left with unit 2609, which is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and also does have a den. This unit is just under 760 square feet, so at this price point, you're looking at just under $1,000 per square foot, which is really good for a downtown condo this new. Let's do a quick walkthrough of the unit, and then let's go over the numbers. So for the unit itself, pretty solid layout. I don't love the corner bedrooms with the sliding glass doors. It's becoming a lot more common with newer condos, but because you do get a legitimate den with a sliding door, which would be great for an office or a potential third bedroom, plus it's very well priced, I'd say this is definitely something that could make a good investment. You're on a higher floor, which is again good for value, plus the maintenance fee is only $565 per month, which is pretty good for a 2-bedroom unit. So the first thing I'm going to do now is find out how much the unit is worth and how much we can possibly offer, because again, we are in a buyer's market, so you as an investor do have the power right now to negotiate. So when I do a quick search, I can see that similar units in the building were selling at the peak of the market back in 2022 in the low 900,000. For the most recent sales, we actually have one sold just a few days ago, unit 2209. So it's another 09 unit which has an identical floor plan that sold for 698,000. There was also another unit, unit 3109, a few days before that sold on January 4th for 719,000. So offer-wise, I'd probably go in the high 600s, but let's say for our calculation's sake, we do end up securing the unit at 698,000, just like the last unit to sell. The next thing we're gonna do is look up the rental rates for similar units in this building. That way, we have a rough idea of how much we can rent this unit for. So there were 5 or 6 similar units to rent out in the last 3 months, and they rented for between $3,100 to $3,400 per month, and I can see the ones that were more aggressively priced did rent right away. There was one at $3,150 that rented in 4 days, and one at $3,200 to rent out in just 2 days. So let's assume we can rent out the unit for $3,250 per month. So when I go to my investment calculator here, I have to fill out all the red boxes. It's pretty much all the things we know. So we said 698,000 for the purchase price, $3,250 for the rental rate. The monthly maintenance fee was $565 per month. The annual property tax for this unit was about $3,045, and then we said our interest rate was 5.14% over 25 years. So right off the bat, we can see our monthly cash flow is negative as expected. Out of pocket, you would be paying just under $900 per month, which is about $10,500 per year. You would need upfront just about $161,000 for your down payment plus land transfer tax, which would be your biggest closing costs. There's a few more closing costs, but they are significantly lower, and I like to keep this spreadsheet very simple. We're going to assume for this example that you are in the 30% tax bracket, which means you make about $80,000 per year. This will impact our capital gains tax when we sell. The next part here is appreciation. So this is obviously an estimation, and I like to be really conservative here. So for Liberty Village, the average appreciation, even with what's happened with COVID, with the peaks and the drops, the average appreciation over the last 10 years is just over 9% per year. So we can play around with these numbers, but let's start with about half of that and assume a 5% appreciation rate. So if we were to sell in 5 years, when you factor in what you need to pay out of pocket, your equity buildup plus the increase in value of the condo, you make just over $107,000. This is taking into account everything: the land transfer tax you pay when you purchase the unit, your realtor fees, and your capital gains tax when you go to sell the condo. The only thing I'm not factoring in here with this spreadsheet is vacancies. You know, that month or two when you may not yet have a tenant, but at the same time, I'm also not factoring in the potential rent increases. So those should somewhat balance each other out. The cool thing here is if we do say sell in 7 years rather than 5, you'll notice our return almost doubles. And then if we were to say sell in 10 years, it almost triples the return we see at 5 years. So you can see why this has to be a long-term plan. The longer you hold the unit, the return does increase exponentially. These numbers, as is, in my opinion, make this a worthwhile investment even at the lower appreciation rate of 5%. But if you do end up receiving a higher increase in value in reality, say 7 or 8 or even 9% like the average, which is very likely, you can see how the return again is significantly higher. This spreadsheet has saved me tons of time because, as you can imagine, when you start to compare multiple units with different price points and rental values, it's really nice to be able to plug in the numbers and compare the end results side by side. So if you want a copy of this spreadsheet, by all means, send me a message or leave a comment below and I'll send that out to you right away. So if this type of investment, or really any of the others that I discussed in this video, do sound like something you may be interested in and you want to learn more about, you can reach out to me again using all my contact information below. Obviously, I may be a little bit biased since I am a realtor, but I really do believe that real estate is one of the best investments that you can make. We can help you with the whole process from start to finish, going through and analyzing properties just like we did in this video, to helping you find a tenant and then continuing to keep you updated with yearly checkups on your unit. That way you're always completely informed about your investment. Anyways, guys, that's it for now. I'll catch you on the next one.